Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be checking out the gaming performance of the 10th generation iPad. Now, I usually don't take a look at iPads and Apple devices on the channel. We definitely focus more on the Android side of things. But with the looming release of new iPads, the 10th generation, which was released in 2022, recently had a pretty big price drop. So I went ahead and picked one up to see how this thing performs. Basically, everywhere you look, the 64 gig model is going for $350, and I think the 256 gig model is going for $499. I went with the 64 gig model, and of course, we could definitely use more storage here over on this device, especially with the larger games on the App Store right now. But in the past couple days, I've been testing out a lot of games on this device, and I'm really impressed by what this thing can handle, especially given the price. Now, taking a look at Android tablets on the market, yeah, you can definitely pick up some really cheap tablets like the Amazon Fire tablets. But in my opinion and experience, the best Android tablets on the market right now are from Samsung, like their high-end Galaxy Tab S9. They do offer a couple different variants like the S9 Plus and the S9 Ultra, but this is the 11-inch model. Looks like Best Buy has $130 off right now, and it's still up there over $600. Now, of course, it does come with a pen, so you do have that drawing capability right out of the box. With the iPad, you will have to buy one of those pens if that's what you're into. And they recently released the Galaxy Tab S9 FE, which comes with much lower specs than the regular Tab S9. I have not tested this one, but I do have the Galaxy Tab S9. That's kind of been my go-to Android tablet for quite some time now. And yeah, it served me quite well. And one of the best things you have over on Android that we don't have on these iPads is the ability to easily sideload third-party apps, emulators, and things like that. Of course, if that's what you're looking for, I would definitely go for an Android tablet. But if you're just looking to play games from the App Store or even cloud gaming, then this could be a really great option. And one thing I recently picked up was this D8 controller. It does have Hall-based analog sticks, a little bit of RGB, and it does fit the 2022 or the 10th gen iPad just fine. Once you get it connected, it shows up as a PlayStation 4 controller, so as long as the game supports controllers on iOS, this is going to work with it just fine. Now, if you're not familiar with the overall specs of the 10th gen iPad, basically what we've got here is a 10.9-inch display with a resolution of 2360 by 1640. This will do up to 500 nits of brightness, and it's definitely not the best display on the market, but it's a lot better than most of the cheap Android tablets out there. When it comes to the CPU, this is using the older A14 Bionic chip. So it's a 6-core CPU with 4 graphics cores and a 16-core neural engine. We also have 4 gigs of RAM with the 10th gen, and you can pick this up with either 64 gigabytes of internal storage or 256 gigabytes of internal storage. And as for the connector, this actually uses USB Type-C, and it does support video out, so you can connect this to a larger display pretty easily. Now, before we jump into some gaming performance on the iPad, I did want to take a look at some benchmarks, and obviously on the left-hand side, we've got that Galaxy Tab S9. It uses the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, definitely one of the most powerful Android tablets on the market right now. For Geekbench 6 on the Tab S9, we got a single core of 2068, multi 5644. And on the 10th gen iPad with that A14 Bionic chip, we actually got a higher single core. Now, it's not by much, 2117, and even the multi-core isn't that far off. And remember, we've got less cores over on that A14. Checking out some GPU benchmarks, now the Galaxy Tab S9 with that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 does beat this out in Vulkan performance. Over on the Tab S9, we got a score of 3783. This is using 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme. And on the 10th gen iPad, we got a 2249. So when it comes to this synthetic GPU benchmark, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is beating out that A14 by quite a bit here. And the final thing I ran was Antutu. And just taking a look at the overall score with that Tab S9, we're right there at 1,600,000. And on the A14, a little over 1 million. And I knew this would be the case. I mean, we've got a pretty powerful Android tablet with that Galaxy Tab S9, and it does handle basically anything you can throw at it from the App Store, but it is a more expensive tablet. The Tab S9 does have a much better screen. It's an AMOLED display with a higher resolution. It's got 8 gigs of RAM instead of 4 gigs, but that price is much higher than this iPad, even when they're both on sale. So if somebody's looking for a tablet, they might be looking at the iPad versus some of the Samsung stuff out there. And I just want to show you what this thing can do with gaming because, again, I was really impressed by what this A14 chip is able to do. Of course, from the App Store, we're not going to be able to download any emulators like we can on Android. And that's really a main selling point for a lot of people when it comes down to it, side-loading third-party apps easily. You can on the iPad even without jailbreak, but it's a bit cumbersome. Here we have Hades. This is a port for iOS, and it actually works really well on this device, especially with the controller. I'm not a big fan of touch controls, but all of these games that we're taking a look at can be used without a controller. And keep in mind, I mean, if you've already got a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, or an Xbox controller with Bluetooth, you can go ahead and pair it up with the iPad and play all of these games. It's not going to be one of these extendable, telescopic, or otherwise known as stretchy controllers that the iPad can go inside of, but it will get you started. For the next games, I'm going to go ahead and set everything down stationary. Using an Xbox controller connected over Bluetooth right now. This is the PC port of Warframe for iOS. Supposedly it is coming to Android, and you can sign up over on their page to learn a little more. Lots of graphic settings that we can mess around with, and on this 10th gen, I've taken the settings down to medium. Resolution scale is set at 80, but it does perform much better than I thought it would on this device. I have previously tested this on the iPad Pro with the M2 chip, and we could basically max it out, but that's a much more expensive tablet there. This A14 does handle Warframe pretty nicely. Here's Devil May Cry, and keep in mind all of these can be downloaded from the iOS store. We're maxed out here from the settings, everything's set to Ultra, and it's really playable at 60 FPS. And even on this display here, it's not an AMOLED or a nice OLED, but it still looks pretty good. Here's Diablo Immortal, very high settings, 60 FPS. Remember, a lot of these games do have settings that we can change, just like PC games. Does come in handy for lower end devices when you want to kind of get better performance out of it, but I was able to max this one out also. And of course, we had to test out Genshin Impact. One thing I like about the iOS version here is it does natively support controllers, so you don't have to use a third-party app like we do on Android to get that controller support. And I thought, given that we have the A14 Bionic chip, I'd have to take these settings way down. But right now, I'm at high settings, 60 FPS with bloom off. This is running great. Not a lot of hiccups at all, and even on Android with higher-end chips, I do notice some stutters every once in a while. This is handling it really well, but it's very well optimized for iOS. I think the devs do spend a lot more time over here, given that they can make more revenue. And finally, Call of Duty Warzone. If you've tried this on any platform, you know that once you first boot it up, it doesn't look great. You do have to kind of stream those textures to make it look a little better. It's not horrible here, and I could play through a little longer, get those higher resolution textures on screen. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of graphic settings. Basically, I've got this at the high frame rate, so 60 FPS, and it definitely feels like it's running at 60. I don't think this is at 30, and even if we're dipping below, it's still staying pretty steady the way it is. But, after testing this out on a bunch of different devices, I personally just like going back to Call of Duty Mobile until, they get a lot of the stuff fixed with Warzone. But I still wanted to show it off here. So at that $350 price tag, I don't think this is a bad tablet at all for gaming. Now, we just can't get all the emulators we want over here like we can on Android. So the iPad definitely isn't for everybody. This is not going to replace my Galaxy Tab S9. I personally love that and the fact that we can basically load anything we want over there. But for people looking for a lower cost tablet, this could definitely be a really good choice, and especially for the kids. This runs Roblox and it'll run Minecraft just fine. And like I mentioned, these are on sale right now for $350, given the 64 gig model, and you can go on up there with that 256 gig model. Apple supposedly has some new iPads coming down the line, and that's how technology works. As soon as you buy something, a few weeks later, something more powerful hits the market. But I wanted to take a look at this because we did have that big price drop on it, and it's really not as bad as I thought it would be for gaming. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you want to see anything else running on the 10th gen iPad, let me know in the comments, and I will leave some links to where you can pick one of these up, and that D8 controller does go along with this tablet quite well. But that's it for this one, and like always, thanks for watching.